Hello, and welcome to the Fantasmagorium show. I am your host tonight, Katarinas, joined by Ernesto Martin Regigalius.
Indeed. My name is Ernesto Martin Regigalius. One half the speaker of the Fantasmagorium show, general of the letterbox account of one and loyal servant to the true emperor, Steven Spielberg, father to a neighboring slut black cat that comes my way, husband to Pamela Hand, hyphenated Durson, and I will have my critique in this life or the next.
All right. So we are here tonight to review Ridley Scott's double feature of ancient Roman epics, Gladiator, which just came to 4K a couple of years ago.
Nice.
And Gladiator II, which just released in theaters about 10 or 12 days ago.
Yes. It's been a pretty healthy box office this weekend, gotta say.
Yes, at $320 million now?
Yeah, $320 million worldwide. Granted, it is the only big budget R-rated movie at the box office right now. Everything else is between family friendly and kid friendly. Hence why Moana blew the record box office over the Thanksgiving weekend, being the highest performing opening weekend for a Thanksgiving type movie. And then you have Wicked, which is still performing well. And I think it was declared today as the highest domestic musical movie in the country.
I believe so. And then 5.5 days domestically has put Moana 2 at $386 million.
Yeah, so that movie is very likely going to flirt with the 1 billion mark, but we'll see.
Yes. And then again, Gladiator 2 after 2 weekends has made $320 million. And Wicked, I did not check that one before. Let's see what it is today. It is at $360 million.
Yes, although most of its box office is being brought in domestically.
Yes, that's true, because they do have a bit of a slower rollout as well internationally. But it's also, I don't think, as big other way, because the musical was mostly done stateside. Because they say it's like based on all sorts of things, like not just the musical and the book, but the original movie and the original, like Wizard of Oz novel. So it's all sorts of things. I haven't seen it yet. Yeah. All the showings were like sold out through last week, which is great for the box office.
Of course. It's great for the theaters too.
Yeah. So I just got out today to see Moana 2. I also saw Red 1 because our friend Ben from Cinema Gulp asked if it was a movie that'd be safe to bring his nephews to. And I think I know around the age of his nephews, but after watching it, I would say no. But
how old are the nephews?
I think they're like maybe 10 or around there, but it's like there's some profanity in it. Gratuitous shots of hot chicks in scantily clad bikinis with butt shots, stuff like that. And it's not really fun for like in a kid-friendly way for a Christmas movie. It's like, yeah, it's a dumb action adventure type thing. So it's like, I'm not really sure who this movie is for. And that's made in now 3 weekends of release, only $148 million against an obscene $250 million budget. And no, it does not look like a $250 million movie.
But we can at least confirm that 50 million of those 250 millions went to The Rock.
Yes. And however much Chris Evans fetches these days.
I don't think he touches them often, I would say.
I think he was getting pretty big bucks from Marvel for Captain America at the end of the Avengers run.
Oh, yeah. I'm sure everybody between Endgame and Infinity War got a pretty hefty walkaway price after there.
Yeah. So anyway, here we are with the Gladiator and Gladiator 2. I first saw Gladiator in December 2000. I did not see it in the theater. I loved it as a kid. I'm like, man, this is a great movie. And it's like as a kid, you think it's one of the best movies I've seen. This is awesome. But then I didn't see it again for like 24. I think this 4K actually came out it came out quite a while ago. I think in 2019 or so. So that was the first time I had seen it since then. And I'm like, I still like it. Not as much as I used to, but it's still really a really good movie.
Yeah.
And it's funny because now that he's done this sequel, it's almost like sequel/remake, but we'll get to that in a bit. So, what were your thoughts of Gladiator I?
Oh, well, I'm not a poet, but it's poetry. It rhymes. I too didn't see this in theaters when it came out, not because I didn't want to, it's because I was still trying to find my way in the movie theater, if that makes sense. It was around that time between 2000 and 2001 where I was being allowed to go by myself to the movie theaters every other weekend. So my dad would leave me like $20 and I could go over there, watch a couple movies, and still have enough for popcorn and a drink. Inflation, people. And so I missed the boat on Gladiator when it came out. I even missed the whole boat on the Oscars thing because I didn't start watching the Oscars until a few years after, like somewhere between 2005, 2006, when I really started to watch the Oscars myself. And I was trying to find my, my niche, my way around cinema and everything and being a film fan. But yeah, I saw it on DVD when DVDs were the hot physical media at the time. And I remember, you know how at the time the Sony remotes, it had that little button where you can hit like a skip back in a way, like a 15-second skip back. Not a rewind, but it kind of gave you like an automatic skip back. And I
I don't.
and I kept skipping back to when Russell Crowe had his monologue when he reveals his face to Joaquin Phoenix, and he had like the best speech of the whole movie about my name is Maximus Decimus Meridius, and I kept watching it over and over and over and over to the point where my father just came out of the corner. Would you just hit play already? And the thing is that my dad did that to me before when DVDs were just starting to come out. And one of the movies he bought was Deep Blue Sea. And every single time Samuel L. Jackson got bit by the shark, my dad kept skipping back, giving me the same shit. So I was like, hey, it rhymes. But I watched it recently before Gladiator 2 came out, and I still enjoy it. I like that the background visuals of Rome still hold up 24 years later. I love the soundtrack, the score. Oh my, mwah! Especially the woman in the background singing. I'm like, bravo, mademoiselle, bravo. The acting is very good. And you can tell that it's this revenge plot, and the acting behind it with Joaquin, uh, Connie Nielsen, and Russell Crowe that really is the backbone that makes this movie come together as great as it does. If it was any other type of cast of characters, it probably wouldn't have done as well as it did.
Yeah, Russell Crowe conveys something in the first movie. Like you could buy that you would follow this guy into war. Like you would die for this guy. He's really, really good performance, and just had. And it's not just that. It's like he had some type of charisma. He just had something.
Yeah, he had
That
the cool factor. He had a very cool factor to him.
yeah, something that nobody in the sequels have. But we'll get to that in a bit.
He's the kind of leader that doesn't have to show off. He just does what he needs to do. He never yells at anybody unless he's really pissed off. He never has to. What's that saying? A king doesn't have to tell people he's king. It's just based on his actions, more or less. And even though he's not a king, he's a general. He acts like a king, and people respect him and regard him as such.
Yes.
And not only is it a revenge story, but it's also a tragic love story at the same time. Not just a love story with what happens to his family in the beginning, in like the first or second act, but the unrequited love that you don't see with him and Connie Nielsen's character.
Oh, hello to our first viewer, Scott. Hey,
Oh,
Cat.
Scotty, the void has allowed you to join us in the chat.
And hey, Ernesto. How does Denzel do? We will get to that in a bit. But it's Denzel, so he doesn't disappoint. uh, so the other thing I really liked about the first movie was Oliver Reed as the guy in charge of the stable gladiators. He was really great.
Yes.
His last film as well, because he died during filming, sadly.
And one of those first instances of visual effects where they superimpose his face in order to get his final shots in.
That's right, they did, and I thought they did a really good job on that. Like I didn't even see.
And it still holds up. It's a blink and you'll miss a moment. If you're not paying attention, you'll know where it is.
And his character's name is Antonio Proximo. And he tells our hero that, you can earn your freedom as a gladiator. Oh, here's Eugene Bird. why isn't you up there antagonizing for our entertainment? Well, because Scott didn't see Gladiator II, and I invited him to join, but he didn't a couple weeks ago, if he remembers, but he didn't express interest in it. So that's why. And the reason I waited, I was supposed to do this like last Monday, but then I forgot about it. And I'm like, I knew I forgot something last week. What was it? I'm like, oh yeah, it was the.
It's the holidays, Kat. You're forgiven.
Yes. So here we are. Quick rundown of the plot for those who don't remember. Yeah, Gladiator. They finish the movie begins with a great military campaign where they're conquering Germania, the last bastion that they have to conquer for the Roman Empire. And the extended cut, most of the footage in the extended cut is from this battle, like a lot more carnage and stuff. So you're not really missing too much if you didn't see the extended cut. The battle's won, and Marcus Aurelius sort of rebuffs his son Commodus on the battlefield. And that night he calls Maximus. He says, look, Maximus, I'm dying. I want you to take over for me as emperor and return Rome to being a republic. Maximus is kind of troubled by it and he leaves. Marcus Aurelius, which still bugs me to this day, that he wasn't smart enough to have a plethora of other witnesses there to hear him making this offer, whether Maximus accepted or not. Because Commodus comes in that night and he misinterprets his father denying him the throne, meaning his father never loved him. And Joaquin Phoenix, in what is like a genuine shock and just despair, smothers his father to death, passes it off as dying of natural causes, but he's going to offer Maximus, hey, you have one chance right now to join me, because he had teased him earlier at the victory party that they're going to, don't get too comfortable back on the farm with your wife, because he wants to go on more, wants him to go on more military conquests. But Maximus makes the mistake of refusing Commodus's hand immediately. He is subsequently arrested, supposed to have been killed. He escapes, only to find that his wife and son have been brutally murdered back home. He's captured, made to be a gladiator. And again, Proximo is the guy who owns him, says you can earn your freedom as a gladiator. Eventually he makes his way to the Colosseum. He's the next big thing there. And Commodus, who's now emperor, wants to see who is this brilliant gladiator. And Maximus reveals himself and gives his badass speech. My name is Maximus Decimus Meridius, father to a murdered son, husband to a murdered wife, former general of Rome, servant of Marcus Aurelius, Rome's true emperor, and basically talking this. I can't remember the whole speech off the top of my head, but he's basically talking this guy down. And because Commodus is so egotistical, egomaniac, it's like, yeah, he can kill this guy anytime he wants to, but he doesn't want the crowd to dislike him because he's so obsessed with the idea of being loved, since he thinks his father never loved him.
Mm-hmm.
And this extends to him being a bit incestuous with his sister, and his sister and his sister and Senator Gracchus, played by Derek Jacobi, are plotting against him, trying to figuring out how to do that. And it subsequently transpires that Maximus has 5,000 loyal troops at the port of Ostia, and they get a message to him saying, look, Maximus is the gladiator here. We're going to depose the emperor. But the emperor finds out about the plot and sabotages it. And rather than just killing Maximus for participating in this, he decides, no, I want to satisfy my ego, so I'm going to kill you in the arena in a fight. But being a jerk, he stabs Maximus in the back, puncturing his lung before their duel begins. Despite this, Maximus wins, killing Commodus after disarming him, because of course he had a knife hidden up his sleeve because he's a cheater. But the Praetorian Guard notably don't come to his defense. And of course, the Praetorian Guard are not just in charge of guarding the emperors, but they sometimes make major decisions in Roman history. They will sometimes deny the throne to somebody, even commit an assassination. And so they're clearly not satisfied with Commodus as a leader. And so they watch as Maximus kills Commodus. And just before Maximus dies of his wounds, he tells the leader of the Praetorian Guard, a former ally of his who even killed his wife and son. The character's name is... Okay, I have it here. I don't have his name here. I can't remember what his name is. But he tells him that, see to it that I'm buried. Things are taken care of. He's like, I will. And the other gladiators are freed. He's like, yes. Maximus dies. They carry him out of the Colosseum. And one of the other slaves, who was
Quintus,
takes the little figurine that he carved and, says a prayer for him and leaves. And one of the other characters in the film, of course, was Lucius, the nephew of Commodus, who is now effectively the rightful heir to the throne. And it's hinted at that, it's said that his father had since died, but but because Maximus and and Lucilla had like a tryst in the past, it's hinted at that he might be the father, but in the first movie, it's not definitive. And so that's the
It's not
story of the
definitive, but you can see it in the look on their faces that you guys fucked.
yes.
We know.
Oh, Eugene Bird, thank you so much. $20 super sticker. You are very extremely generous in keeping the lights on here at the
Oh,
Fantasmagorium.
that gives him a thumbs up in the
Major
Coliseum.
thumbs up, Eugene Bird, keeping this channel alive and ticking.
1 cent at a time, people.
Hot damn, paying for me not to be on the panel. I can't.
Yeah.
Yeah, that is kind of funny.
Hey, the boy works on a payment plan. 10 cents a month.
Eugene Bird says he's basically the Charlie Bronson of ancient Rome. Sounds like, yeah, basically.
Yeah.
Sad ending for sure. It is a very downer ending.
Yeah.
It's like, yeah, the dipshit emperor gets what he had coming to him, but it is very sad.
But he
And
did get what he wanted in the end. Even though it wasn't the best of circumstances, he was pretty much on almost in like, what's it called? What's the word when you're between life and death?
Purgatory?
Yeah, it's almost like purgatory for him. Like he's supposed to die, but what's fueling him is to get his vengeance before he finally says, "All right, I'm ready to go."
Yeah. And part of me is still annoyed by the fact that, I mean, I get it. Quintus is the Praetorian Guard. He's got to do what the emperor says. But given that they clearly turn on Commodus at the end, it's like Marcus even told Maximus in the beginning, he's like, I can't let Commodus have the throne. He knows, he's not a moral man, that he's evil, all this kind of stuff. And so if Marcus Aurelius knows that and Maximus knows that, having grown up with Commodus, then you would think that the Praetorian Guard knows that. And given historically that, again, they have decided who Roman emperors have been in the past, I was surprised that they went along with Commodus to begin with. And it's always bugged me that, because I so desperately want Maximus to kill Quintus at the end, because Quintus is the one who tells him straight to his face, oh, we're going to go kill your wife and kid now. And as the emperor says, oh, your son squealed like a little girl, we nailed him to the cross. It's like, well, Quintus and his men did that. I wanted Maximus to so badly kill Quintus, and it didn't get to happen.
Also, no offense, but that kid is a brawler. He survived taking a horse dead on. Sheesh.
Yeah, geez.
Like this is how the scene doesn't just cut and all of a sudden Maximus arrives to the farm to see his charred up son and wife. We see the kid get pummeled over by not one, not two, several of the Praetorian Guard's horses, just plowing right through. The fact that he even tell them that I heard your kid squeal when we put him.
He might be lying.
Yeah, he might, but when you take it in that context, it's like, God damn, that kid is strong.
Like the horses could have killed him, and they just crucify him for the the indignity of it. Because according to, as we find out in the sequel, the crucifixions are considered undignified or for Christians or petty thieves, especially not for the sons of loyal generals. But again, I was always surprised. I mean, as a little kid, I didn't really know about the Praetorian Guard and the amount of power they wielded. So looking back on it now, I'm surprised that they even went along with Commodus to begin with, even if they didn't know that Marcus didn't want him to have the throne. It's like, really? You want this guy over the guy you've been with your whole lives, Maximus? And even then, they don't know that Maximus doesn't want the throne, but it's like, really? You're going to obey what Commodus wants him to do? It's like, So that's always been a bit weird. But it's a great movie.
It, so.
Yeah, but it's a great movie.
Oh yeah, it is. Costume-wise, visual, cinematography, pacing, it's all there.
Yeah, I think I gave it a 4 out of 5 on rewatch. I probably should up it a bit, but it's a good movie. It's a solid movie.
Yeah, it holds up.
It won Oscars for Best Sound, Best Visual Effects, Best Director for Ridley Scott, Best Actor Russell Crowe, and Best Picture.
And everybody's ego grew 10 sizes that day.
Exactly. It did. And I don't necessarily think that was the best picture of the year, but okay. It definitely rode the popularity wave and that was a movie that came out, I believe, in the summer, in May, if I'm not mistaken. So that was really, it cost $103 million and it made like $460 million at the time.
Yeah. So, which again, very respectable.
Very respectable. It would probably have made even more money if released today for the first time. Yeah, that's right. It was released May 12th of 2000. That's pretty early for the Academy to still look back on it and recognize it. Made $465.5 million. So that's pretty good. And especially since they didn't spend like hundreds of millions on, marketing back then. So the budget, so that's very respectable and did a great job. What rating did you give Gladiator 1?
I would probably go like as close to an 8.5 in that area. We're doing like a 10 scale, so maybe like a 4.25, something like that. Like
Yes.
it's I like it very much. I think it's very rewatchable. It's one of the last, and if you look at the history of the genre of the swords and sandal, not including the Pirates of the Caribbean series that would take over as the baton as one of the last in that genre, it's one of the last great sword and sandals that ever came out. Like if
Yeah.
you're looking between the classics versus the modern classics, I say Gladiator in 2000 is the last great modern big screen adaptation of that genre. And as far as TV goes, I would say the Spartacus TV series is the one that holds the title for the most entertaining, even though it doesn't really follow history to a T. But we don't get to see movies like this that often anymore. And the Pirates of the Caribbean movies were the last staple to really make a big impact at the box office because we got a remake of Ben-Hur and that thing tanked completely.
Yeah, and Gladiator also was one of the first, like, really big popular sword and sandals epics in nearly 30 years at that time.
Yeah.
Uh, there were still a couple one-offs here and there, like, that weren't and but not something like Clash of the Titans, which is more, yeah, sword and sandals, but more supernatural. But, like, you hadn't seen a really big, wildly popular sword and sandals movie like that for quite a long time, which it benefited from. Ben-Hur, I didn't see the movie, so I can't speak to whether or not it was any good. I remember seeing the trailers, it looked like there was a lot of CGI. And, there's also gonna be that syndrome of, "Oh, how dare you remake something like that," that kinda thing. Uh,
But even
but
if
again, I haven't
but
seen it,
even
so
if you didn't have the "Oh, how dare you" attitude, nobody went to see it at all.
yeah,
It's like that was not the appetite. The superheroes were the appetite. So even if you were doing a counter programming, people are just like, "I'm sorry, what is this? And
yeah.
who's in this movie?" Danny Houston was the lead actor, and that was a big mistake. No offense to him, but he's not the person you want leading a movie like that.
Mm,
Also, I checked the calculator for inflation. Apparently, at the time, the 103, how much was it? 103 budget that
100.
yeah, that the movie had would be close to 190 million dollars by today's standards. And its overall performance is somewhere between the high 800 to 850 million collectively.
Okay, that's pretty good.
So if
Uh,
you were to adjust for inflation, it's a pretty big performer of its time.
yeah, and so I remember this is the first movie I'd seen Joaquin Phoenix in, and I thought he was great. He was also nominated for the Oscar, but he lost to Benicio del Toro for Traffic, which is pretty good.
Yeah.
Uh, but, yeah, this is a great movie, had a lot of longevity. Uh,
Would you say that both that movie, Traffic, and Gladiator almost have the same color palettes? Like when
that
you're
Traffic,
changing
Gladiator, and what else?
that Traffic and Gladiator have almost the same
Oh,
color
yeah,
palettes when they're changing from one location to the other. When they're
yes.
in Rome, they all have that blue warm color, but when they're anywhere else, it's like that bright orange with a type of yellow.
Mhm.
So I'm just like, huh, interesting. I didn't think about it until just now.
Yeah, and the other thing that kinda bugged me about the first movie is that I think there were a lot of almost too many close-ups in a lot of the gladiator fights. Like, I kinda wanted to follow the geography of the fights a bit more, or the choreography of it. Like, some of it was super close up and a lot of cuts, so, that kinda bugged me a little bit, and I think that's something they improved upon with the sequel, but, uh, still a great movie. And,
I
I'll show this off now that we have viewers. I'll show this off again. But yes, Gladiator 4K. Yes, but the really good transfer job that they did on
I think a year
this.
and a half ago is when I bought that steelbook I showed you for like 1989 that they had it on Groove. It's
Mhm.
basically Maximus in silver armor with
Yeah,
a
I've seen that one.
shield.
Yeah,
Yeah, I like it. I like the shininess of it.
yeah, that's
Uh,
available again now too.
I should probably check. I don't know how to look it up, but I wonder if the tigers that they used in the first Gladiator are the same tigers that came from the farm area that we from Tiger King.
I don't know. I actually
'Cause
didn't watch the Tiger King documentary.
yeah, but in the documentary, they show how he made most of his money, and I think it was him, and his competitor. Both of them were making a big bulk of their money by allowing Hollywood to use their tigers and lions. And I'm wondering if one of those two tigers were used for this movie because I know The Jungle Book, the live action Jungle Book that came out around that time, was one of their tigers was used to be Shere Khan. So I'm like, huh, I should probably look that up.
The one from 30 years ago, 94.
Yeah, with what's that guy's name?
I can't remember his name,
I
but I
had
know.
Sam Neill as the guardian for Mowgli,
Yeah,
and Linda Hetty was the love interest.
that's possible then, because there's not very many movies, especially back then, that would use tigers and stuff like
Yeah.
that.
And they had a very good jump cut where the tiger gets stabbed here. I mean, you can tell there's a little bit of visual effects going on, but it's like you have to be looking for it. And since I've seen the movie more than once, I am looking for it because I'm always dissecting something that I might have missed. Like,
Yeah.
do you recall all those famous bloopers that this movie had, like the guy in jeans just walking in the background while Maximus is having a speech?
I don't remember that. I'm sure they probably removed it for the 4K.
I know, but it's somewhere on YouTube. It's just like he's having a very serious conversation, and this fat ass in jeans is just walking in the background. I'm like, bro, we're filming here. But the movie holds up for me. It's very enjoyable.
Yes. So now we move on to Gladiator II, a sequel
Oh, yeah.
nobody asked for, nobody seemed to be anticipating, but it's here, and we have to deal with it.
But it's here, and I, for whatever reason, for the longest time, like a few months before the movie came out, or even before we had a trailer, for whatever reason, I thought in my head we were still holding on to that story idea where the gods were going to send Maximus back to fight or do something in their honor to save Rome. But then that got changed over time. So for whatever reason, I thought that Russell Crowe was still attached until when the trailer dropped and I started looking up information. And I think he said in an interview, "No, I'm not going to be in it. That's stupid. Leave me alone."
Yeah, he said for a while that he wanted to be in it, but I think they just shot that down because it's the first movie's very grounded, and to go full blown supernatural like that.
Yeah, he would turn into their version of Kratos at that point.
Yeah, and he aged out of the role anyway.
Aged and gorged.
That too. So it's like
there's no amount of fasting to help you there, my man.
yeah, that's not gonna happen. But
He would actually play the Proximo character more at this point in his age, if you think about it.
Oh, Eugene Burr says they were gonna do Clash of the Titans 3, basically.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's not too far off. And I remember reading about that years and years ago, before social media was even most a thing. There were rumors about that online and certain movie websites that they were gonna, oh yeah, the gods are gonna resurrect it, and they had a script written and everything, and it just didn't. And Russell Crowe at the time wasn't interested, and then Ridley Scott went to do other things, and
I
they
hope that
eventually,
script surfaces one day. I would love to read that.
and then they reteamed for American Gangster instead. But yeah, that didn't happen. So we get to Gladiator 2.
Washington's Oscar, by the way.
What?
It earned Denzel's Oscar, right? American
No.
Gangster. No, it didn't. I swear to God.
He has a supporting actor Oscar for Glory. He has an lead actor Oscar for Training Day.
Huh.
He should also have one for Malcolm X, and he should also have one for The Hurricane, and he should also have one for Fences.
He should.
But he doesn't. So he's 2 and 5. However, he's been nominated 6 times. So he's 2 for 6 nominations, but he should have 5.
Damn, I don't know why I thought he won. Maybe that's a Mandela effect I'm having.
I don't know. I don't even think he got nominated for American Gangster, if I'm not mistaken. He might have been. I don't recall.
For whatever reason, my brain thought he did. Let's just leave it there.
Yeah. So this movie was shot in Malta. They even built the Colosseum on the same site that they built the original Colosseum. And Russell Crowe, I guess, was vacationing near there while they were filming. He thought it was so surreal to look over there and see. It's like, oh, wow, it's back.
Like, oh, damn, did I transport in time? Or am I drinking too much?
Ridley Scott, of course, has been cranking out movies like crazy. He's got 8 films in development right now. To crank this movie out within a year and a half after, because Napoleon, yeah, it came out only a year ago, but he has probably other people doing handling post-production a lot, because to get this movie out that quickly, it's like he was probably working on it before, well before Napoleon was even finished with post.
Can I just say he has a fantastic turnover, I must say.
Yeah, and I don't know if you heard, but his cinematographer kind of came out and threw him under the bus last week.
Oh, shit, what happened?
He says that Ridley's really lazy, that he just shoots everything with several cameras at once this time, And if things like the boom mic are falling into set, or there's somebody walking in the back, rather than just fix it and reshoot it, it's like, we'll fix it in post. And they're not taking the time to really direct the scenes, that because usually you would film one half and you film the next one. Now they're doing multiple cameras simultaneously, and it's like, yeah, that might be lazy. And but here's the thing: visual effects have gotten to the point where it's really easy to remove something like a boom mic, or even the shadow that a boom mic might create. So that's not a big deal, especially when you're Ridley Scott and got the money that he's got, that he's been given for these budgets. The 6 camera things, okay, maybe a bit lazy, sure, because he says it's like, the way the cinematographer put it, it's like if you come to like a 5-star restaurant, you want the chef to really spend time to make you something great. You don't want to just go there and just have him crank out crap and it just has the guy's name on it, you know? And I think the answer to why Ridley's doing this that fast, because he's 87. You know, he's racing the clock. He doesn't have time to spend 6 or 9 months shooting a movie like he
and
used
the
to.
beauty of it is that technology has gotten to the point where he can make movies like that. I mean,
Yeah,
I get it. I understand the argument, but I'm like, bro, there's a reason why he's able to move from one product to the other. He has the technology available to make him shoot it in less time than what it cost him to shoot the first Gladiator movie.
yeah, and I think the thing that like my friend and I joke that Ridley Scott lost his Ridley Scott card after last great movie he did was American Gangster, but all the inaccuracies of that film aside, but I think if there's any fault, it's not really in the technical aspects of the films. It's just in the scripts and stuff. So it's not rushing the film schedule has nothing to do with why his movies haven't necessarily been as good. It's the storytelling that, in the scripts, which he's not writing. So
9 out of 10 times you can't say his movies don't look good. They look amazing.
They do. They do. They do look amazing.
They come out, they look fantastic.
And everybody has been super impressed with the cinematography on this sequel. They're like, this is a real banger job.
Seriously,
And for him to say that the movie would look a lot better if they didn't rush it is kind of saying a lot. It's like, okay, you're really pushing yourself on a pedestal here. That kind of, I want to see what else you could do.
But look at this list. He just had Gladiator. Before was Napoleon, which was last year. 2 years before, House of Gucci, and in the same year, The Last Duel. Granted, COVID has something to do with it, but still, there it is. In 2017, he had all the money in the world. Not only did he film that movie, but it took him a week to refilm all of Kevin Spacey's scenes with Christopher Plummer just to make sure that he can avoid controversy and still try to turn a profit in order to make sure that the controversy didn't cause the movie to die altogether at the box office. Then he had Alien Covenant, The Martian, Exodus, Counselor, Prometheus, Robin Hood, Body of Lies, all within 2 years of each other. 3 if you're pushing it.
Yeah.
Like, say what you will, the man, I mean, yeah, you can make the argument of the script, but goddamn, does he know how to make it look good?
Yeah, for sure. Catarinas, yes. And Ernesto has his name as well. We're going to need a bigger chariot.
We are. So, especially after what this movie accomplished.
Yeah, with this movie, it's sort of combined sequel / remake. Yes, it is literally a sequel because it takes place 16 years later. But it's also a bit of a remake because there's pretty much three major characters who, in a sense, have two of them have a near identical arc to Maximus, and one of them has a part rehash of Maximus. And it's like they really weren't trying much to make a new story. I didn't really read much as to what the background for the backstory for this was, as to how this happened, but it's kind of like the movie opens with sort of how the first movie did. It's another Roman campaign, the last to expand the empire, except this time they're telling the story from the opposite perspective. So the Romans seem like the bad guys. And you have, a guy we know to be Lucius going by the name of Hanna, but we already know it's Lucius. It's not really a spoiler to say that. And they have to defend the Numibia, which is in northeastern Algeria, against the invading Roman army led by General Acacius, played by Pedro Pascal. And it's kind of the same kind of arc. Oh, there's a battle, and this guy gets caught, and he's sold into slavery to be a gladiator. You can earn your freedom in the arena, and it's like, I'm sorry, but and eventually people find out that he is Lucius, the rightful heir of the Roman Empire. And what do you know? There's a whole army of people loyal to Acacius in, the port of Ostia, the same place that Maximus's troops were. But here's the thing. Paul Mescal does not have what Russell Crowe had. I'm sorry, he doesn't. He's like a regular guy, and it's like, okay, it's fine, but you're no Maximus. You just don't have that charisma or that factor for me to really get behind you or really care. Uh, Pedro Pascal, I thought, was a better actor in the movie, had better material, a little bit better material to work with, I guess. But his is a very similar arc where, okay, he's conquered the last kingdom. He just wants to retire and go home to his wife. The emperors are like, oh, don't get used to it. You got other campaigns going, blah, blah, blah. The only difference is rather than refusing the emperors to their face, he pretends to agree while trying to set in motion the same plot that Maximus and Lucilla were trying to employ in the first movie. Oh, you got the troops stationed in Ostia, the same 5,000 troops, same number of troops, and we're going to go against the emperors and all that. And of course, the plan's going to get foiled and you're going to sentence to die in the arena, blah, blah, blah. So it's like both of these characters have the same arc essentially as Maximus in a way. And I don't know what the impetus was behind that. It just, that's what they went with. And for my money, the most interesting character in the film is the new Oliver Reed substitute, Proximo substitute, the character of Macrinus, played by Denzel Washington, who's, again, he owns the stable of gladiators. He decides to buy Lucius, who he doesn't know at first is Lucius, and we see that he has his own machinations for what he wants to do. And I think the movie would have been a lot more interesting.
Man, are you not entertained?
Yeah, it's like, I think the movie would have been a lot more interesting if he were the protagonist. Because, like, why are we telling the story of Maximus again through two separate characters when neither of them have the level of charisma? Like, Pedro, I could see being a guy of the character he plays, Acacius, comes off as an honorable guy. But I can't, like, he's distressed about the victory at Numidia and seeing all the people mourning their dead and everything. So he's a good guy. Whereas Mescal, again, he's just a guy. Like, I don't really care. So why don't we follow a new character instead of just repeating what we've already done before? And Macrinus, I think, would have been a great character to follow. Denzel is by far the best actor in the movie, not just in terms of his resume, but in terms of performance. But it's not necessarily the best Denzel performance I've ever seen. It's just that he's miles better than anybody else in the movie. And his character is based on a real character. Macrinus became emperor through, it's sort of a tricky means, if you will. He also connived his way to the top.
Oh yes, tricky. Oh yes, very tricky.
Yes, with the mixed results for the real Macrinus, who strangely is reviled by the ancient Romans in history because the two emperors in this movie, played by Fred Heikinger and Joseph Quinn,
the most inbred emperors to ever inbred, I swear to God.
Yes, Caracalla and Gaeta. Caracalla, I think, has syphilis probably. Because at one point
they have something, all right.
Yeah, because Gaeta says at one point, "Oh, my brother, the sickness in his loins has spread to his brain," and you could tell that that Caracalla is a complete nutcase. Like he has this pet monkey that he dresses up in dresses all the time. He's just weird.
You know what I think? I think after they showed that scene when they're sawing off the rhino ivory horn, I think they were just snorting the ivory horn a little too much in this movie.
Yeah, but in history, those two were not good emperors either. Basically, in the year 198, their father appointed the older of the two to be his co-emperor. 11 years later, in 209, he appointed the younger of the two to be the third co-emperor, I guess. And then 2 years after that, the father died in February 211. They became co-emperors at that point. And there was such animosity between them that they never saw each other. They never interacted with each other. They forbade their entourages from even being in the same room together. And it culminated in the year 217, or in December of 211, just 9 months later, with Gaeta trying to assassinate, or it was Caracalla. One of the two tried to assassinate the other and failed. Then he got the mother to agree to broker a peace meeting with just the two of them, but the guy secretly brought his centurion there. He's like, no, I'm going to finish the job. And he literally had his brother murdered while he was crying in his mother's arms. And then he placated the mother with more power, more gifts, and he continued to rule through the year 217. And he raised the salary of the Roman soldiers from 2,000 denarii a year to 3,000, and started wars with three kingdoms for no reason, just because he's, egomaniac. And he eventually was deposed by Macrinus because the soldier thought that the emperor had insulted him at one point. And, for the emperor being a very pro-military, because, again, he raised their salaries and started wars to benefit them, But this guy felt insulted, so Macrinus engineered it so that way this guy would be able to get close to the emperor and kill him, which he did, at which point Macrinus immediately had that guy executed and became emperor. And to fix the problems, in his 14-month reign, Macrinus settled all the conflicts in those 3 kingdoms by paying a lot of money. He knew he couldn't reduce the pay of the military, but he needed to because the economy was not going to be able to sustain it. So he decided that any new recruits were only going to get 2,000 denarii. And since he ended the three wars they were involved in, that meant less work for the military. So the military didn't like him. The people didn't like him because they were bothered by the fact that he was of a modest background and not an aristocrat. And then the vanity of the Romans in general were bothered by the fact that he never visited Rome during his reign. And so eventually he was deposed after 14 months, and then he was struck from the record as if he never existed. Because, oh God, how dare you never want to come to Rome? How dare you? But it's like everything I can find him in this guy is he was a good emperor. He did what needed to be done. It's like, we got to rip the Band-Aid off, So that's a historical context for these 3 characters as played in the film. The Emperor's Gates and Carcalla and Macrinus. Obviously, the movie goes a bit differently, but I love the way Denzel plays Macrinus as this conniving guy, and the way he's gaining power in Rome. And I would have given it a pass if at one point if you just said "my man," because that's what Denzel.
No, I was waiting. I was that moment in the 3rd act when they're at the bridge and they're all surrounded. I was expecting him to be like, "Oh, I see how it is. You can't do this to me. I'm the emperor here. Julius Caesar ain't got nothing on me."
Yeah. Oh, hello, Herc 130. Hail.
Hello, my man. How are you? My Roman, my nearest.
So we have a lot of CGI. All the animals in this movie are CGI, from CGI baboons to CGI.
Can we please address the elephant in the room?
Yeah,
Can we please?
Mm-hmm.
Because when I saw the trailer, and even though historically they did have aquatic battles, we know this is true because they could flush the arena with water to have fake aquatic battles and everything. Can we please address this? Because when I saw the trailer, it's a blink and you'll miss it. One of the guys fighting falls into the water and something takes him and eats him and tears him apart, and you see the blood in the water. For whatever reason, because logic dictates that this is the first thing that pops into my head, I'm thinking, and are we okay getting into spoilers? Because we are kind of in spoiler territory here. It's already been a couple weeks.
Yeah, it's been a couple weeks. If anybody has a problem with spoilers, just tell us. I don't think anybody does, but
but I'm just going to throw that out there because I'm pretty sure if anybody has read up on the movie, they probably already spoiled this anyway. There are sharks in the arena. 20 of them, to be exact. I counted. And when I saw the trailer, in my mind, I'm thinking, surely these are crocodiles. Surely it makes more sense for these to be crocodiles that they took from the Nile just next door, and not freaking sharks with practically freaking swords on their freaking heads. Because I'm like, as it's happening, I'm like, I like the sound quality because I'm watching it in IMAX sound quality. I like the cinematography. Everything here is working, but my brain is working even more trying to figure out how the fuck did they get sharks in here and keep them alive long enough for this to happen. I'm not saying they jumped the shark, but I want to know how they got the shark.
Eugene Bird says sharks in the Mediterranean, in the Colosseum, because there's the scene in
the
trailer. So I did some research on this. It is true that in, I think, as early as 46 BC, they did flood the Colosseum for marine games because at the time there was no basement, and they had the ability to do that. Now, sharks with shorts. There's no record whatsoever that they actually caught sharks and brought them to Rome. I mean, is it impossible for people as engineering prowess as the Romans to do that? Not necessarily. They could build like glass cages or whatever to fill water. I don't know. Is it likely? No. I just don't ridiculous.
See them making an aquarium, number one, for it. Number two, it's
they could have migrated carried by swallows.
I'm just trying to imagine.
On their heads.
Yeah, I'm just trying to imagine them fishing them, number one, and then carrying them however many miles it was from the nearest shore to the Colosseum, and then keeping them healthy and moving around and fed before the game start. That's where my brain was going throughout that whole sequence. I get it. I'm supposed to just accept it, but I could not accept it for that simple fact that I'm thinking, how? And why couldn't you just use crocodiles?
Yeah, so that's a scene which, again, there was too much CGI. It was shorter than I thought it was going to be, and it just didn't like. It just seemed like because before I knew the sharks were going to be in there, it just seemed like a badass thing to have the boats inside the Coliseum. Like, man,
It
that's rad.
is.
They
It
even had
is.
the fake desert islands with the cardboard like cutout palm
Yes, I
trees.
agree. Everything you're saying, I agree until the shark.
Well, the shark. And it's like the sharks, it's like, yeah, I don't buy it anymore, but it's like, whatever. It's just the scene, again, it looked too CG. Like the
Yeah.
rhino it looked CG, the baboons were CG. And I get it, they don't want to do the, exotic animals getting in any kind of trouble or averring that, which
Yeah,
is
we're
fine.
away. We're far away from that era.
Right, yeah, so we're far away from that being a problem.
Yeah. Although if
No,
you see in one of his interviews, he did ask, basically contemplating about what kind of, because he, in the last movie he had the tiger, so he wanted to one up himself with animals, so he wanted to double down on it, and he's trying to figure out, okay, how can I increase the tension? How can I increase the carnage if I'm going to use animals? Do I use tigers again? Do I use lions, elephants, what? And he remembers talking about watching a video where a guy came across a baboon, and he went up to the baboon, not knowing that the baboon is known to be very carnivorous if you're not careful, and they can be very aggressive. And you see this grown man just struggle to even fight one off, and in his mind thinking, all right, you know what? Baboons, that's going to be our first showcase.
yeah, and that's a great scene too, because Lucius is smart enough to tell everybody, look, uh, don't antagonize them, just stay together. But Macrinus, having anticipated this and using the baboons to test the gladiators to see which ones he wants to buy, has his guys shoot the baboons with blow darts from these hidden trap doors, so that way they would become aggravated and attack the gladiators. I'm like, man, that's vicious. It was pretty good.
And you have that one hairless baboon that he's like, at one point he starts like, I'm King Kong here, and all of a sudden Lucius is like, oh shit, I can't mess with that one. That one's crazy.
Yeah. So it's like, so from a story point, it's like, okay, so Lucius gets captured at the end of this campaign. He's sold into slavery. Macrinus buys him, and he tells Macrinus straight up, I'm not going to fight for you or for Rome or for anything like that. He's like, fine, just fight to live or die. That's your choice when you're in the arena. But I can promise you, if you do fight for me, I can get you whoever you want. Who do you want to kill? And he's like, the entire Roman army. And Macrinus laughs. He's like, well, that's too much. How about,
Too
and he's
much.
like, well, how about General Acacius then? And Macrinus is like, okay, I can get you that. And it's like, and I was kind of interested when he said that because I didn't know what Macrinus's game was yet. And so, of course, he eventually fights his way to the Colosseum, being a great gladiator. And his mother, Lucilla, who has since married General Acacius, played by Pedro Pascal, she figures out who he is because he recites poetry. He quotes Virgil at one point when Macrinus, to try and gain leverage over a senator, decides to put his best gladiator against his in a betting match. And of course, it's a really funny scene, and Lucius wins. And when the emperor demands to know who you are, Macrinus is like, oh, he doesn't speak the native tongue, just covering for him because he doesn't want to make a scene. But
Yeah.
then he quotes Virgil, and when when Lucilla learns about this, and the poet is now fighting in the arena, she deduces that it must be Lucius, and that's where we finally get the flashback revealing that she was so paranoid that upon Maximus and Commodus's deaths, that with her son now being the rightful heir and 12 years old, that he would probably be killed by the Praetorians to be replaced with who they wanted. So she sent him away to Egypt and promised that she would come back to get him. But eventually he had to flee Egypt to go to Numidia, and again in Algeria. And so he kind of resents her because she never came back for him. He's been living the life of a farmer and a simple soldier rather than in the Roman Empire. And he despises Rome now because it's like you claim you're spreading peace, but you're just bringing war and death and destruction everywhere. So at one point, when his mother comes to see him in the cells, he just rebuffs her, and she decides that because she and her husband Acacius are plotting to overthrow the emperors, once again aided by Senator Gracchus, played by Derek Jacobi, who was not aged a day in 24 years. It's
No,
exactly the
no.
same.
He
But
might
and
as
so
well
it's like the
still be
same,
playing operatic Star Trek if he could.
right? So it's like, again, it's the same gladiator story where even Acacius, he conquered the last kingdom. He wants to retire with his wife. The emperor says, "Oh, not so fast." But rather than making Maximus's mistake, which was refusing his hand, He pretends to agree, but tries to set in motion the same plot. I got 5,000 troops that are going to be in Ostia. We can wait to the end of the games that the emperors are throwing in my honor for my victory, when the guards will be down, and we'll seize the city. The only difference is, because he's not a gladiator, instead of having to break out of the arena, Lucilla tasks him with breaking in to rescue Lucius, and that's where he gets captured, because, of course, Macrinus, being the genius that he is, has gotten a senator in extreme debt to him, and in order to forgive the debt, he rats out the plot, which has been whispered to him by the the servant in Lucilla and Acacius's household. And we see what Macrinus is trying to do. He's trying to gain leverage, and now that the senator is such debt to him, he has ownership of his house. He wants his loyalty, and of course, the emperors love Macrinus even more for ratting out this plot. And they were going to crucify the two of them, Lucilla and Acacius, but he's like, the Macrinus is like, no, that's for commoners and common thieves and Christians. You should send him to the arena. Let the gods decide. And so Macrinus did keep his word. He delivered Acacius on a silver platter for Lucius to kill in the arena. They have a fight,
and it leads to my favorite scene in the whole movie, which is not just the battle, but the moment that Acacius looks at his men and salutes them and bows before the fight, because there was enough respect that they know what's about to happen, that they served him loyally for however long they did. And they're just like, my lord. They bow, and then they went for it. No regrets, no bad feelings. We're just going to do it and fight like men. And my God, the execution from start to finish, that was the best scene of the whole movie for me.
It was, and especially the end of the scene where, after he kills the 4 soldiers, he's tasked with fighting Lucius. He says, look, I know who you are. I know you hate me and all that, but I will stay by you. And so he surrenders to Lucius, gives the symbol of surrendering. The master of ceremonies notes that, and Lucius is the emperor does the thumb thing to say, should I grant mercy or not? And like an idiot, he's like, let the gods decide. I'm channeling the gods, and then he just gives the thumbs down. But Lucius won't kill Acacius, even though he wants to, or even though he claimed that he wanted to. And so the emperors, being little dipshits, have the Praetorian Guard, who have their archers in the arena, in the stands, execute Acacius instead. And it leads to my favorite point in the movie, where Lucius shouts down the emperors and everybody in the arena who is applauding, saying, is this how Rome treats its heroes? Mm-hmm. And if they, pointing at the emperors, if they have put so little value in the generals, like, what do you think they think of the rest of you, pointing at everybody in the stands?
And then the arrows come in.
And you could, they'd already killed him at that point.
Yeah.
And that's
that's true. I misremember. I apologize. Yeah.
And that's like, I thought that scene was so good. It was the only time I could get behind Lucius. Yep. Like,
because at that point, he was just seeing red up until that point. That's all he cared about, red.
And that causes a massive riot in the city, because the people have come to their senses, saying, yeah, what the hell is this? And
Rome was already on thin edge, because there were more. Like, if you were to put this movie with the first one, and you were to compare how many poor people are in the streets in the first one versus now, it has tripled almost by 10, 30. Like, there are more poor people outside of the arena than inside. I'm just like, do you really want to piss off your audience?
Yeah. And even Macrinus goes to see him in the cells, and I gave you what you wanted. I gave you the general and a silver platter. Why did you not go through with it? And he says, because that's your plan. I'm sticking to mine. And he could tell that Acacius wasn't who he thought he was. He thought he was just some vicious guy who thought of them all as barbarians, and he realized that wasn't the case, because his particular grudge against Acacius is that Lucius's wife was also a soldier. She was an archer who was causing enough of a problem during the battle that Acacius called to his archers and says, kill her, and they did. Yeah.
And even though Acacius didn't release the arrow that killed her, he gave the order. So that was pretty much, Lucius was just hard target on him from day one. And when all he does seeing is red, any reason, any way of talking him down, he wouldn't hear any of it. And it's kind of sad, because they could have been man at arms at one point. Because I remember that scene where Acacius turns around and sees Lucius. And this is where Pedro Pascal's acting really comes in. You see the look in his eyes. It's like, oh shit, stop. No, wait, don't do this. You don't understand. And I'm like, Lucius, stop and listen.
Well, yeah,
I wanted to jump in there and just hold him back.
And that's ultimately why once he surrenders, and per the terms of the fight, once you surrender, it's up to the emperors to decide if they're going to grant mercy or not. And when the emperors say no mercy, it's like Lucius could have killed him, but he doesn't because he sees that Acacius is not, again, who he thought he was. And he conveys that to Macrinus. And the rioting continues. And so the emperors were concerned, what are we going to do? We can't really put this down. And the Macrinus steps in and he separates the dipshit from his older brother. And he fills the dipshit's head with these lies that, oh, your brother's going to blame you for this and throw you under the bus. And the brother confirms that the reason for his sickness or whatever, he's even sterile because in the womb, it's like this sometimes happens where one twin starts kind of like feeding off the other, or it deprives the amount of nutrients there and it causes extra problems. And so he's like, and Macrinus is like, oh, you remember that though? And he's like, yes, I remember. And it's really funny because of course you can't literally remember that.
I swear, the ivory powder that they've been snorting.
Yeah, and
Can I just say that Joseph Quinn's big eyes kind of played into the Greta character, because at one point when he yells, "The gods have spoken," I'm like, all right. I wonder how many takes that took, but goddamn, your eyes really just bugged out for a second.
Yeah, and Fred Heikinger is the dim-witted one who Macrinus convinces him that your brother's going to put all the blame on you. And he's like, he lies, he always lies, it's lies. And so he goes to confront his brother, and his brother, surprisingly, for the first time, shows genuine care and love for him, but that doesn't stop him from taking a knife and from the nutcase from taking a knife and slashing his brother's hand. And his brother grabs him and tries to stop him. And then Macrinus walks up and just helps him take the knife and cut Greta's throat, killing him. And it's like, holy shit. And they never explain who they blame for this. It just, like, they cut to a different scene. And it's like, well, you had to blame somebody for this, yeah. And so he's dead. And the dipshit is now the sole emperor. And he appoints his pet monkey as his chief consul, which alarms the entire Senate. And then he appoints Macrinus, I should say, as his second, or his third, I should say, his third council. And so Macrinus decides to get the power that he truly needs when the emperor leaves the room by taking out the severed head of the other emperor, putting it on the podium, and talking to the Senate and addressing what I need is power. I need control of the Praetorians to put down this riot. I need control of the army. And it's clear that he's sending a message that I did this, not him, and you will be facing the wrath if you don't do what I say. And the guy who owes all the debt to him is the first to speak up in his favor, and so they all give him what he wants because none of them like the dipshit emperor anyway. Oh. And that leads us to the next bit where even the dipshit's smart enough to know that, okay, even though Lucilla was also a conspirator in this plot to overthrow us, we shouldn't kill her, right? Isn't there a way we shouldn't? And he's like, no, you have to. Until she dies, you will not be able to consolidate your power. And one of the other senators says to Macrinus, but she's loved by the people. This is suicide. And he's like, oh yeah, suicide for him because they'll hate him even more. We can then depose him and the people will be happy. That's politics. Which is great.
Can I just say, as an aside, since this is the same year, not only we got Gladiator II, but we also got Megalopolis, which you can kind of tie some parallels here. Can I just say that the actor who plays Caracalla, I swear that would have been a Shia LaBeouf casting if ever there was one.
Yeah, Caracalla is played by the same actor who played the grandson in Thelma with June Squibb, where he's kind of like the dim-witted guy also, but he's trying to do the right thing, but he's just a dimwit. And he's
but just looking at Shia LaBeouf's character in Megalopolis, I swear to God, you can switch those two and it still fits.
Yeah. Hey, Matt G.
Hey, Matt G. Just being Matt G today? All right.
Affinity.
Hello, Affinity.
We have here's some interesting bits from Herc 130, a quote. He says, for over 1,000 years, Roman conquerors returning from the wars enjoyed the honor of triumph, a tumultuous parade. In the procession came trumpeters, musicians, and strange animals from conquered territories, together with carts laden with treasure and captured armaments. The conquerors rode in a triumphal chariot, the dazed prisoners walking in chains before him. Sometimes his children, robed in white, stood with him in the chariot or rode the trace horses. A slave stood behind the conqueror, holding a golden crown and whispering in his ear a warning that all glory is fleeting. That's a great
Well,
quote.
it kind of goes with that saying that Rome wasn't built in a day, but oh, how quickly it can fall if you're not careful.
Yes, because before she was to be executed for plotting with her husband to overthrow the emperor. And again, Acacius, as we just told you, has virtually an identical character arc to Maximus in the first one. Almost identical, except for the part that he didn't get. His arrest came afterwards, but it's the same arc, basically.
Indeed.
But Macrinus goes to see her in her cell, and he reveals his motive. He says, yeah, when I mentioned to you before that I met your father, and I served under your father, there was more to that story. And he reveals that he was Marcus Aurelius's slave, and was branded by him. And he says, much like your father's philosophies, I'm going to take his advice. He says, because your father once said, the greatest revenge a man can have is to be a completely different person than the man who injured him. And he's like, I am going to be completely different because I am going to become emperor, and I'm going to end the dynastic reigns of the emperor, and I'm going to burn down Rome, basically. And the movie is framing this like it's a bad thing, but it's like, if you're a slave and you had to earn your freedom by killing other slaves, by way of being a gladiator and stuff, it's like I can't really fault him for wanting to do this or think it's a bad thing when you look
Oh,
at just how corrupt and debauchering the empire has become.
Yeah, it's kind of like the what's his name?
Oh,
From Black. Yeah.
Oh, real quick, Herc says that was a quote from General Patton that I was reading off. That's a great quote, by the way.
Yeah.
Yes.
It's kind of like Michael B. Jordan in Black Panther. Like when you see everything he's going through and the reasons why he's doing what he's doing, I mean, you can kind of see his point, even though you don't agree with it. Now, it's kind of a shame because at the end of Marcus Aurelius's reign, he just changed his tune the older he got. So you have Macrinus, who's pretty much holding to this rage of being a slave and having been put through what he did, but he never got to see Marcus in a more enlightened time. He only got to see him when he was younger and more of a conqueror than a peaceful man. So it's kind of like a tragedy because his dream has always been to see Rome in a much better place than where he left it. Like he lived long enough to see that all this war, all this fighting, all this conquering is really not going to sustain it. And you can kind of see it with Maximus and you can see it with Acacius. At some point, it is going to run you to the bone and something has to change. You can't keep fighting these wars forever. And yet they're always having to come back. Even though I know it will probably take them like maybe a year and a half to 2 years to just rest up before the next siege. But in the movies, it makes it sound like you only have a weekend to rest before you got to go to the next conquest.
Right. Because the emperors wanted Acacius to now go conquer India and Persia, to which Acacius replied to the emperors, well, Rome has many mouths to feed. And the dipshit emperor's like, well, we'll feed them war. It's like, oh, God. So it's like, yeah. And so when Macrinus reveals this is his evil plan or whatever, it's like, you can tell from the lighting and the tone of the music that they're trying to make this seem ominous, but it's like, yeah, go for it. It's like, I didn't see what the problem was. But it's like, okay. Meanwhile, Lucius has befriended a doctor of the gladiators and given him Maximus's ring, which was given to him by his mother, and the doctor in turn showed him a shrine that the gladiators kept for Maximus, including his armor and his swords. And so Lucius tells him, take this ring and give it to the leader of Acacius's lieutenant with the troops at Ostia and tell them to still march. We're still going to do this. And he also takes the doctor's keys to the cells. He unlocks everybody's cells, but has them pretend that they hasn't been unlocked. So the day of the game of the execution for Lucilla in the arena, along with the conspiring senators, including Senator Gracchus, where Lucius is supposed to be the one guy tasked with defending her against the Praetorians. So it's like a suicide mission, basically. Mm-hmm. Or basically him being sentenced to death because you're not going to beat all the Praetorians. No sooner does he get in the arena and this battle starts, he raises his sword as a signal. All the gladiators storm the arena and start fighting the Praetorians. Senator Gracchus is killed during the melee, and the leader of the Praetorians, as well as Macrinus, recognizes the threat, whereas the dipshit emperor thinks, oh, yay, real war!
He had a very moment there.
Yeah, and Macrinus says, summon the cavalry to put this down, and the Praetorian leader says, well, my lord, there's like 5,000 troops from Ostia marching on the gate of Rome. And he says, well, what's our strength? He says, we have 6,000. He's like, okay, we'll send him there to hold him at the gate. I'll take care of it. The Praetorian, meanwhile, who are in the stands, kind of fuck up, and they accidentally kill a civilian, and that prompts the civilians and all the attendees to rebel against the Praetorians, throwing him in the arena. During the battle, the Macrinus takes advantage of all the chaos to slip a long razor pin out of his hidden in his attire, and he shoves it through the emperor's ear, killing him. And it's
Oh
like,
my God! Did you
ugh.
feel it as much as I did?
I did. It's like, oh God, right
Like,
into his ear through
like
the
all I
brain.
have is tinnitus, but I felt it going into my ear.
Yeah, he kills him.
And the
Then he has
camera
one.
just really zooms in on it. I'm not kidding. That thing just goes in there.
He does. And of course, none of the Praetorian don't care because they thought the emperor was a dipshit and probably would have killed him too. So he then asks the Praetorian for his bow and arrow, and he kills Lucilla with it because she is the last person standing in his way who can confirm that Lucius is who he says he is.
Yeah.
And that's the last person in the way to being emperor. So he kills her, and he takes off and takes a horse and rides down to the gate of Rome. And in a ridiculous moment that broke my immersion, Lucius not only gets a horse, but he effortlessly rides past all the Roman soldiers marching down there, and nobody stops him. And they get to the gate where the two armies are there. He faces down Macrinus, and he announces who he is. Like, I am Lucius Verus Aurelius, grandson of Marcus Aurelius, the rightful heir of the throne. And Macrinus stupidly confirms his identity for the whole crowd by saying that bloodline is not enough. You need more than that. And so he's like, well, I'm here to liberate Rome from, tyrants like you. And so they get in a big fight, and Macrinus gets the upper hand, knocking Lucius into the river and tries drowning him, and then tries bashing his sword on him, but it's just hitting the armor and not having an effect. And Lucius, remembering his mother's words, grabs a stone from the riverbed and just smacks Macrinus twice in the head really hard. And then he actually slices off Macrinus's left hand with his sword, and then slices open his stomach, and Macrinus is dead.
At this point in the movie, for whatever reason, I was hoping for Crocodile Ex Machina to show up and just bite him.
Right.
It was like perfectly set up for an alligator or a crocodile, like a Nile, just show up out of nowhere and just bite him right there from the water. Because that usually is what happens when you have two warriors fighting that close to the in a watery area where all the armies are there. I'm just like, I swear a crocodile would have been perfect right here.
Yeah.
But no shark, unfortunately, so it didn't jump the shark at that moment.
Yeah. And then he gives a very cheesy speech. Oh, returning
Rome. Say that speech would not be heard by anybody more than 5 feet away from him.
Exactly. He's given this speech that supposedly a combined 11,000 people can hear, and it's like, no. And he's like, are we tired of fighting for the vanity of tyrants and blah, blah, blah? And the Praetorians and the Roman soldiers stand down, and then the General Cassius's troops stand down. And it's like, yay, the dream of Rome that everybody constantly talks about throughout this movie, the dream of Marcus Aurelius's Rome, which was lost after Lucius was sent away, is now going to be a reality. And then he returns to the arena, grabbing the sand and remembering his parents. And that's the end of the movie.
Yeah.
So again, Paul Mescal does not have. Yeah, Paul Mescal. Yeah, that was Lisa Gerard.
Yeah,
and they did it.
I like that as a capper. I like that.
It is good. They did an abridged version of the song, though. I noticed they kind of rushed it.
I don't know why, but I feel like they also mixed in "I Am Lincoln" from Jablonski from The Island in there for whatever reason. My brain was just going places. I'm just like, hey, I like that. And you see him, Lucius, going, "Father, speak to me," and then you see the hand of Maximus in the Pelennor fields. I'm like, oh, yeah. That's actually kind of nice. I actually appreciate that.
Which was in turn copied in Avengers with Thanos walking through his field with the gauntlet grazing all the branches, which was then copied now in Gladiator II. So it's like,
did you see when they released the Coliseum popcorn bucket that someone on Instagram filled it with popcorn and started rubbing his hands all over the popcorn, just like that scene in the Pelennor fields? I mean, it was brilliant, and it had the music in the background. I was like, bravo, this is what the internet is for.
Yeah. So I think the fight choreography is better. I like the way the action is shot. You can actually see a lot of it better, at least to me. CGI for animals is forgivable. I'm not going to get that big on that. Again, Paul Mescal does not have what Russell Crowe had. He has a virtual similar arc to Maximus, and then again, General Acacius, played by Pedro Pascal, who was a much better actor,
Yeah.
also had an near identical arc to Maximus. And then the most interesting character in the movie, Macrinus, is a supporting character who doesn't show up until about 35 minutes in or so. And it's like he was the guy I wanted to follow. He's the character who I thought was most interesting, and I'm like, maybe he was going to be a tyrannical emperor. It seemed like from what he wanted to do was that he was going to, end the dynastic reign of the emperors, burn it all down, free the slave, or whatever he was going to do. And it's like, no, the movie's trying to make you think he's a bad guy. He's the villain.
Yeah. But he's also the perfect example of that one character that has more power and more influence, not as the emperor, but the man behind the emperor. And I've always been fascinated by those kind of people that if you give them the power, they just lose a lot of their influence. But if they were like the third or fifth or sixth person in the back, that's where they have their power because they have that influence. They know how to talk to people.
Yeah.
Once you give them the title of emperor, it's like, heavy is the crown. Interesting.
Yeah, and it's
kind of like a Lex Luthor situation. President, do you know how much power I would have to give up to become president?
Yeah, there was also a scene where he visits Lucius and he says the greatest power a slave can have is to own another person or to be slave master, basically. But he also says he wants to burn it all down. So it's kind of like mixed messaging. Like, what is it that you actually want to do?
I swear there has to be a meme somewhere with Samuel L. Jackson from Django Unchained when he sees Jamie Foxx on the horse, and then you put Macrinus on a horse. I swear that has to be a meme right now. I'm not gonna quote it because I don't want this channel to get bogged down with censorship. I'm just saying, for those who know, you know what I mean. Can I just also say that in the first movie, and again, I saw it recently, but I wasn't really looking for it. Was there ever at any point in that movie, to your knowledge, where they show, how they always had those busts of previous leaders, and did they ever have one of the emperor? Did they ever show one?
Of Aurelius, I think they did.
Because I wanted to see if I could pull it up and then pull the one that they showed in this movie, which looks more like Paul Mescal than I would imagine would be the previous one. Because they do make a point of saying that, they both have the same nose or something like that. And then you see the statue in this movie, and it's basically a portrait bust of Paul Mescal.
Oh, I didn't notice that it looked like him. Yeah.
And hey, guess what? He might not have been the best actor in the movie, but now we know who Paul Mescal is.
Yeah, I kind of think that a lot of those old Roman statues all have the same faces.
Okay, but you know what I mean, right?
I mean, I would if I thought I recognized him as Paul Mescal, but I didn't.
No. I mean, not him per se. Well, as an actor now, he's gonna have cachet because now people know who he is. He was doing independent movies prior to this movie.
Yeah.
But in this movie specifically, when Macrinus is confronting Lucinda, she has a statue of her late father in her courtyard, and that's where Macrinus kind of figures it out that who Lucius is, and there's a statue right there of her grandfather, and it just looks like Paul Mescal. So hopefully when the movie comes out, I can do like a cross-examination of the previous emperor's bust in the old movie and this one and see if they actually changed it or do they actually look alike.
Yeah.
Just maybe one of those like things that you do when you have time to kill.
Yeah. So the first one I gave 8 or 8.5 out of 10. This one I would give like maybe a 6.5 or or 7, because it's like too much of it feels like we're repeating. It's like we told this story before, but you told it better the first time. Because I feel like they were trying to hide the fact that Paul Mescal wasn't as good as Russell Crowe by making this more of an ensemble piece rather than like in the first movie, it's very much Russell Crowe and Joaquin Phoenix, those two guys. And here it's like a bunch of people, like all sorts of other things.
Yeah, I give it a 3.5. It's better than I thought it was going to be because, again, you're kind of rolling the dice on making sequels to one movie franchises, and that has been the trend for the past 10 years. But since a few of them have worked, this is one of those situations where it's just like, is this going to work or is this going to crash and burn? I don't think it crashes and burn. I don't think it works as best as it could have been had you, like you said, we discussed this earlier. It's not really a filmmaking problem. It's a script problem. But it is saved by an ensemble cast, specifically Denzel Washington, who pretty much just owns the scene the moment he walks in there. And by the time he exits stage right, he's still the man you came to see. He is the one who's entertaining you. Are you not entertained?
Yeah. And I think if it wasn't releasing amongst Wicked and Moana 2, it would be doing a lot better. I mean, 320 million is still great for 2 weekends, but
yeah, and it's still going to be in the top 5 for a bit before it fizzles out. So I see this movie making somewhere in the 500, 600 range if it keeps that steady climb, because there's really not going to be that much coming out between now and until The Lion King and Sonic comes out. So it still has enough to perform. It is still something different that people are going to the cinema to watch, because we have seen some movies coming out this year that are not superhero flair. There's something totally different, and people are going to watch them.
Yeah.
So it's one of those like, oh my God, it's a breath of fresh air to see a sword and sandal now after how long since the last one? So,
right.
So yeah, I recommend it if you want to see something like, especially watch it in the best quality theater. Like I know it doesn't have the premium format right now. Like all the IMAX screens are going to Moana and whatever else Wicked has to play it. But if you do have the opportunity to watch it, if you have a Cinemark and you have access to an extreme digital screening or AMC Prime Audio, and it's playing Gladiator II, I recommend it, because the sound quality of the sound mixing of the swords clashing with each other, the chariots busting, the bones breaking, everything that has to do with sound and the cinematography in that crisp look, fantastic to watch. Highly recommended.
Mm.
And if you are going to wait for watching it at home, if you have a good Bose surround sound, by all means.
Yes.
Yeah. But that's pretty much our review of Gladiator I and Gladiator II.
Finity says Memento Mori was literally what the Caesar was told. Remember death.
Yeah.
So I'm going to thank the chat, Finity and Herc130, Eugene Bird for keeping the lights on. Thank you, absolutely.
Yeah.
Matt G, thanks for being here.
Oh, and before we forget, I also wanted to mention that there was kind of like a repeat of the way Maximus killed that one guy with the 2 swords at one point. We get that repeat here, not only in the trailer, but in a very cool back and forth fight between Lucius and the Rhino Wrangler.
Right.
Like that guy was fighting for his life more than Lucius was. I'm like, holy shit, that guy was like, I ain't gonna die here today. Oh, hell no.
Yeah. And I thought there was going to come a time where the senator would learn to stop betting against Lucius, but he didn't.
Which, by the way, not only did the guy go bankrupt, but his hair, like, Jesus. Like, talk about sad clown, my man.
Yeah.
I was expecting Denzel to tell him, I own your house. I own you. I own your ass. Turn around.
That's basically what he says when he kisses his hands in the side of his face. Like, I've got, I own you now. I need your loyalty.
I own your ass, my
I'm pretty sure that's the scene where, because Denzel says they cut it, where he says that he did kiss a guy on the lips in this movie. That's probably it.
Probably.
And it's because he's totally owning this guy. Because the senator is just sweating bullets at this point because he's at 10,000 in debt to Macrinus.
Yeah. Also, just for the sake of argument, as flamboyant as Macrinus was in this movie, would it even surprise you?
No.
Like the way he was holding his robe and just having like a twirl around here, I'm just like, all right, you're bringing back that Scar energy from The Lion King, that flamboyant villain attitude. It's like I can see the Jafar in you with a little bit of Jeremy Irons coming out. I see. Respect.
Yeah, so that was he was great. I just wish he had more screen time and more scenes. He was the best
And
character.
He brought that signature laugh that only Denzel can bring. It's like only Denzel can get away with that in a movie set in Roman Empire.
Well, it's also again how nobody's speaking in any type of accent, and they're reading
mostly British accents these days. But this was just like a cavalcade. You had a Spanish actor, you had a guy from New York in there.
Yeah, and they're reading newspapers 1,000 years before the invention of the printing press.
That was, oh my fucking god! You know what that reminded me of? That reminded me of Alexander the Great with Colin Farrell. I swear to God, there was a moment where there was clear English somewhere on the wall. I'm like, why is this English?
I
Like I
also,
know England was under Roman rule, but nobody was speaking perfect English back then.
another thing I wondered is when you see the names of the gladiators carved into the wall, and Maximus's name has been struck off. I'm like, by who and why? They didn't really
That is
answer
a
it.
good question. The only person who would do it is Commodus, but his name wouldn't be there yet.
Right, because his name's written there too, and it's like, well, who would have struck off Maximus's name? So that was kind of weird.
Maybe it was for effect, so that when he gets to reveal that his yeah, we get it. We're not
Yeah.
stupid. Scripting 101.
Well, it says nobody's watching anymore, but sometimes this isn't accurate. Sometimes this isn't very accurate with the live feed, I've noticed. So,
No, I'm sure we entertained our guests enough.
yes. Are you entertained? Are you not entertained?
Yeah, let's go hold
Oh,
hands and walk into the fields. Why don't we?
he did say, by the way, Ridley Scott says that a third film is in development.
Oh,
Uh,
good.
and it's
Do you
like
think he'll film the fall of Rome?
he might, because he hinted that the story is going to be that now Lucius finds himself with all this power that he didn't want. It's like, well, if he does what he said he's going to do and return Rome to being a republic, it wouldn't be an issue unless he feels he has to clean house first. But I don't know. It's like, does anybody want a sequel with Paul Mescal as the lead? It's like, eh. It's like, once again, just like the first movie had the problem where you announce a sequel and the two best characters in the first movie are dead.
Yeah.
And the third movie, it's like, well, you've killed Macrinus, who's the best character in that movie, and you killed General Cassius, who's a great character. It's like, they're dead. So, like, do we need a third Gladiator movie? And again, when you call it Gladiator, people are going to expect the story to somehow revolve around the Colosseum and being gladiators rather than just political intrigue and all of that. So, and I think that's why this movie largely repeats the plot beats of the first movie, because it's like, well, we need to find a reason for the story to surround the Colosseum and gladiators. So
Yeah.
we'll just do the same story again. So I don't know if this will get a third one. That again, this production company was not, this wasn't an Apple film, right? So this was let's see who made this movie. Here we go. Production company, yeah, Scott's production company, and then a few other productions distributed by Paramount. So
I mean, the only way I can see a third movie happening is if the focus is basically on, because the groundwork has already been set in this movie, if you really want to think about it. Because when Acacius tells the emperors that doesn't Rome have enough lands, doesn't have mouths to feed, and you can kind of go with the overexpansion of the empire because they're stretched too thin, and then the financial struggles because you mentioned it you mentioned it earlier in the review that about the soldiers being paid more every year, but but no wars were happening, so they were losing money. We can also bring that in, and then more invasions from barbarians, which we saw in the first movie. We can bring back the barbarians and the Goths and Vandals and everything. And then because of the rise of Christianity around this time, we can also bring that in. The old gods are being forgotten and the new god is taking over. So we can make it the fall of Rome pretty easily. Like Lucius is trying to give it back to the people, but all these forces are happening. Granted, it wouldn't make sense that they're all happening at the same time because that's not exactly how Rome fell. But given that this is a Ridley Scott production, all of them are going to happen at the same time. It's like a
yeah,
powder keg waiting to go up, and I can imagine Roman flames at the end of the movie.
yeah.
So that's if it would happen. I really don't feel the need to do it, but maybe they're just throwing it out there to see if after he does his next 6 projects, which he does have 6 projects right now in development and pre-production, maybe that'll be like his final send off, a third Gladiator movie. But if it would be great if he did one more Alien movie as a send off, but then who knows what he's gonna do?
Well, we know what he would want to do for a third Alien movie. He'd want to finish the Prometheus trilogy.
Hey,
Because
he's at
Covenant
that
kind of
point
ends
where
on
he can do it.
yeah, because Covenant ends kind of on a cliffhanger.
Yeah.
But I guess because of the reception of that movie, he either wasn't interested, or the studio said no, one or the other.
But he did have some say in Romulus.
I think that's also because Fede Alvarez reached out to him.
He probably whispered very, very heavily into his ear. He probably grabbed that same jagged thing that Macronus did to Caracalla and just be like, "You're going to put Prometheus in there if it's the last thing I do."
Yeah.
All right. You all have a good night. Thank you for joining our review. We'll be here on our next adventure, Into the Shadows. What that will be, well, you'll have to wait and see.
Yes. So see, thank you all for joining. Hope you had a good time, and see you later.